Silence can be your greatest ally, the foundation of your growth, and when you learn to use it, you show courage and wisdom. However, this power is often misunderstood, as people think that being quiet means hiding, feeling ashamed, or being afraid. In this video, I'll show you how silence can become a powerful tool in your daily life. Inspired by the teachings of Stoic philosophers, I'll introduce you to simple actions that can completely change the way you react to certain situations. What you'll hear here is short, but it can open your eyes as if you've been learning for years. So listen carefully to every word and see how silence can guide you to the results you desire. As Lao Tzu said, silence is an immense source of strength. So let's begin to discover what it can do within you. Part 1. Silence in your personal growth. We often spend our days trying to be noticed, trying to show others our worth. The pressure to be admired, respected, or accepted keeps us running around, always searching for something new. But amidst all this hustle and bustle, have you ever tried to stop and listen to your own voice? If you truly want to know yourself, the first step is simple yet powerful. Disconnect. Turn off the television, close social media, and calm the thoughts that keep swirling around in your head. Find a quiet place where you can be alone. It could be your room, a park bench, or a quiet corner of your home. The important thing is to create a space of stillness. It's in this moment of silence that you'll begin to hear what truly lives within you. You'll realize what truly matters. It may seem small, but silence has the power to reveal profound things about who we are. Over time, you'll realize that many of the things you thought were necessary for happiness may not actually matter that much. And the curious thing is that you'll discover something even greater. You are already enough. You don't need to chase more to feel whole. Think about that friend who's always trying to be noticed, seeking more compliments, more attention, more things to show off. They seem busy all the time, but inside they feel an emptiness that nothing can fill. Now imagine if they simply stopped for a moment. If they gave themselves a chance to breathe, think, and listen to what their heart is trying to tell them. They'd probably understand that they don't need this endless race to find joy. Perhaps they'd realize that calm and serenity lie in silence, not in confusion. Silence brings a clear light within us. When you learn to befriend it, you begin to understand its purpose and discover your true strength. Not because the world has become calmer, but because you've learned to find yourself, even amidst the noise. And this isn't a luxury, nor something you indulge in occasionally. Silence is a necessity, just like getting a good night's sleep, eating right, or taking care of your body. No one can maintain balance if they never take time for peace. It's in this quiet space that you recharge, find clarity, and regain focus. It's there that you develop the calm you need to face the day's challenges without losing control. Consider a common situation. Someone provokes you. If you respond immediately, full of anger, the situation worsens. But if you take a deep breath and shut up for a moment, you'll have time to think before acting. This brief silence is like a shield. It protects you from acting impulsively and empowers you to choose wisely. Another example is when someone ends a relationship and immediately starts another. This happens because they haven't learned to be their own companion. When you learn to be okay with yourself, relationships become more sincere, based on truth rather than neediness. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said that only those who reflect before reacting can truly thrive. And this is absolutely true. Amidst so much noise and rush, people who know how to stop and think find clarity, wisdom, and success, whether at work, in relationships, or in their personal lives. How you use your time reveals what's most important to you. When you choose silence, you choose to connect with what's essential. You're saying yes to inner peace and no to the distractions that keep you from it. Silence isn't just for rest. It strengthens your mind, helps you make better decisions, and brings balance to your heart. Every moment you spend in silence is a step closer to the person you want to become. Noise makes us forget who we are. Silence reminds us. When you learn to value this quiet space, you begin to understand your true nature and live with more purpose. As Stephen Richards said, it's when you find the silence within yourself that you begin to understand the chaos around you, and finally, everything begins to make sense. Part 2. Silence as a form of emotional strength. There is a kind of strength that isn't displayed in muscles, shouts, or sweeping gestures. It's a strength that manifests itself in stillness. It's the power to remain calm when everything around you demands a response. Silence, when born of awareness and not fear, is one of the purest forms of emotional mastery. It reveals not weakness, but self-control. It shows that you've stopped being a slave to impulse and have learned to choose your battles wisely. We live in a culture where reacting is almost automatic. If someone attacks you, you defend yourself. If they provoke you, you respond. If they judge you, you try to explain. But the Stoic learns early on that the world doesn't need your reaction. It needs your lucid presence. Because in the end, those who master silence master themselves. And those who master themselves overcome any situation. Responding to everything is a sign of a tired mind. Silence is a sign of a mature mind. Silence isn't the absence of emotion, it's its control. It's knowing you can feel anger, sadness, or frustration without needing to be guided by them. The wise person feels but doesn't surrender. They observe emotions passing by like someone watching the sea, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always in motion. And they know they don't need to dive into every wave to understand the ocean. Seneca said that nothing is more powerful than he who has mastery over himself. And that's exactly what silence does. It creates a space between impulse and action. In this space, reason enters, consciousness awakens, and chaos loses its power. Every time you choose not to react immediately, you're training your mind to be greater than the moment. You're telling yourself, I control the situation doesn't control me. Emotional silence is an invisible fortress. It protects you from the traps your ego sets, the need to prove, justify, or win. When someone tries to destabilize you, the impulse to react is natural, but true strength lies in not falling into the trap, because reacting is easy. What's difficult is remaining firm, with a calm heart and a clear mind. Anger, when fueled, diminishes you. Silence, when cultivated, enlarges you. The world tries to teach you that being strong means fighting back, but silence teaches you that being strong means remaining whole even when attacked. Silence is the art of choosing peace over immediate victory. It's the act of preserving yourself, not out of cowardice, but out of lucidity. When you don't respond to the poison, it dies without finding a way to act. And those who understand this discover a power that doesn't depend on words, a calm, centered, and permanent power. This doesn't mean repressing feelings or swallowing everything that happens. True silence isn't repression, it's transmutation. It's transforming the energy of emotion into understanding. It's feeling what needs to be felt, but with awareness. It's using pain as learning, provocation as training, and discomfort as a mirror. Every time you silence yourself out of wisdom, you're strengthening the most powerful muscle there is, self-control. Epictetus taught that no one is free while a slave to their emotions. And that's what silence liberates. It separates you from the emotional storm that tries to overwhelm you. At first, it's difficult. The urge to react comes on strong. The need to defend yourself seems urgent. But over time, silence becomes natural. It becomes an internal shelter, a reflex of balance. When chaos strikes and everything inside you screams for an answer, try breathing and not acting. Observe, feel, wait for silence to arrive before deciding. You'll notice that in a few seconds something changes. Anger subsides, pride dissolves, your mind clears. This is the moment when silence does its work. It restores your power. Mastering silence is like learning a subtle art. No one applauds, no one notices, but it completely changes the way you live. Because silence doesn't make you less expressive, it makes you more selective. It teaches you that not every emotion deserves a stage, and not every provocation deserves a response. Ultimately, emotional strength lies not in silencing the world, but in not letting the world take away your calm. And when you understand this, you realize that silence isn't emptiness, it's plenitude. It's the state in which nothing forces you to react, because you've already understood that true power lies in remaining at peace, even when everything around you tries to make you lose your center. Part 3. Silence in the face of an offense. Staying silent when someone offends you is one of the greatest treasures you can develop, and it requires much more than just holding back words. You need to have control over your feelings, a control so firm that it overcomes the urge to react immediately. Imagine this. You're among friends, laughing, having fun, and suddenly someone says something hurtful. You didn't provoke, you didn't do anything, but you're still attacked. What should you do? If you respond, no matter how fair your words seem, you end up playing the same game as the person who offended you. Even if your response is intelligent and accurate, you become part of the conflict. Conscious silence, however, is an invisible weapon. It confuses those trying to provoke you and often leaves you feeling lost. The Stoics believed that true strength lies not in returning an insult, but in refusing the invitation to fight. Mastering silence is gaining self-mastery. It may seem like cowardice or fear, but it's actually the opposite. It's choosing to act wisely. Few understand that reacting is always a decision. If you can't control silence, you can't control your emotions. And when you can't control your emotions, the world controls you. Instead of acting with reason and purpose, you just react, and often regret it later. The real test comes when someone hurts us. It's at that moment that we feel our dignity being tested. It's hard not to feel the weight of the offense, but here's the secret. You have the power to not feel offended. Emperor Marcus Aurelius said that if something external causes you pain, it's not the fact itself that hurts you, but the opinion you form about it. And you can change that opinion right now. It transforms everything. When you begin to see the offense clearly, you realize it doesn't have to be you. Thus, control returns to your hands. The silence that arises from this understanding is not weakness, it is strength. It is a firm choice to not carry the weight of what was said and to move forward free. It is not running away from the fight, but recognizing that certain battles are not worth your energy. Remaining calm in the face of provocation is a rare and admirable thing. Few can achieve this kind of mastery. Most end up falling into the trap of reacting quickly, being led by others as if they were puppets. Think back to the scene between friends. What was once joy turns into chaos. This happens when you get carried away and let chaos in. There are two types of silence, that of omission and that of intention. In the first, you remain silent, but inside you still feel anger, pain, and regret. This hurt lingers in your mind for days, months, or even years. In the second, intentional silence, you simply don't give the offense room to grow within you. It doesn't touch you, it doesn't find shelter, and you move on in peace. The Stoics remind us that we don't control what others do, but we can choose how we respond. When you master intentional silence, you become calmer, wiser, and stronger. And that's how you begin to live with clarity, acting with purpose rather than impulse. This control, the ability to choose your response, is true power. Part 4. Silence as resistance to the ego. Few recognize how much the ego fears silence. It needs to be heard, acknowledged, validated. It wants to prove, defend, correct. The ego thrives on reaction, and silence is what weakens it. Therefore, practicing silence is a form of resistance. It's refusing to feed the part of yourself that wants to be right all the time. It's choosing peace over vanity, serenity over contention. The ego is noisy. It speaks even when your mouth is closed. Through thoughts, comparisons, justifications, it feels alive every time you need to explain yourself, assert yourself, respond. And it's in this cycle of noise that the soul tires. Silence is the pause that cuts off this flow. It's like turning off the energy tap the ego uses to feed itself. When you decide not to react, it tries to provoke you. Are you going to let it go? Are you going to accept being misunderstood? But that's precisely where its power begins, when you realize you no longer need to prove anything. The Stoics knew that the ego is the greatest enemy of inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is folly to seek applause from those who do not understand the value of silence." For him, true greatness came not from appearances, but from the stillness of the spirit. When you silence your ego, you begin to see more clearly. The need to defeat others disappears, leaving room for self-conquering, and this victory is silent. No one needs to see it, because the simple act of not reacting is already a triumph. Silence is the opposite of pride. It doesn't need to be recognized because it knows its own worth. It doesn't vie for the last word, because it understands that truth doesn't depend on who speaks loudest. When you practice silence in the face of provocation, your ego contorts, but your soul expands. It's as if you step away from the emotional mire and begin to see the bigger picture. What once seemed offensive is now just distant noise. Epictetus said that he who is angered by what he cannot control is still a slave. The ego wants to control everything: what people think of you, what they say, how they interpret you. But silence liberates because it accepts that not everything requires a response. It shows that maturity is not about retaliating, but about understanding. Silence is the shield of those who no longer need to prove themselves right. It is the refuge of those who have transformed pride into discernment. Over time, silence becomes a mirror. It reveals how much of what you call self is just noise created by fear. The ego fears being forgotten, but it is in self-forgetfulness that you find your essence. When the mind quiets, the real you emerges, simple, whole, unmasked. In this state, you realize that the ego is just a role you've learned to play, and that silence is the return to your authentic self. Silence as resistance is not weakness, it is self-control. It is the mastery of energy that was previously wasted defending the imaginary self. It is an internal revolution. The ego wants to be admired. The spirit wants to understand. The ego wants to be noticed. The spirit wants to be at peace. And silence is the bridge between the two. Seneca said that the greatest proof of wisdom is constant tranquility. And this tranquility arises when you learn not to respond to what doesn't need an answer. When you let your pride dissolve, your heart becomes lighter. Arguments lose their meaning. The need for recognition disappears, and what remains is an unshakable peace, the kind of peace no one can take away, because it depends not on applause, but on self-control. In a world constantly shouting, "Look at me," silence is an act of spiritual rebellion. It separates you from the crowd seeking visibility and returns you to the depths of your being. Each time you silence your ego, you take a step toward freedom. And when that freedom becomes a habit, you understand what the wise have always known. True power is not in being heard, but in not having to speak. Part 5. Silence and your mental health. Silence has a power that many don't realize until they stop and truly feel it. We're surrounded by noise all the time, endless conversations, songs that get stuck in our heads, notifications that won't let us rest, and even thoughts that won't let us rest. All of this tires the mind. This constant noise robs us of our calm and, along with it, the clarity to think straight. When we're caught up in this turmoil, it's hard to make good decisions. We end up acting on autopilot, reacting to everything without thinking about what we really want or need. Now imagine taking a break, a moment when everything around you becomes quiet and you're left alone with yourself. This silence, simple and profound, has the power to lift the weight of the mind, as if it were suddenly reset. When we stop talking, reacting without thinking, and following external pressures, we begin to listen to what's inside, and by truly listening, we discover what's important and what's just disguised noise. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to concentrate when your head is full of ideas and worries? It's like trying to see a blurry drawing. Silence has the power to clear that image, helping you see everything more clearly. When you stop feeling compelled to respond quickly, justify yourself, or defend everything you think, you begin to see the world differently. This can be the perfect remedy for days when your mind is tired, when tasks seem endless, or when problems seem overwhelming. Sometimes simply stopping for a few minutes, taking a deep breath and being silent is enough to put everything back in place. Think about a time when you had to make a difficult decision, but were confused, full of doubts and other people's opinions. What if you had stopped for a moment of silence earlier? How many answers might have emerged? When you remove the noise from your mind, you create space for what truly matters. Silence gives you time to think better, understand things, and make wise decisions. It becomes a space for reflection and a chance to reconnect with who you truly are. And in this process, you realize you have much more control than you imagined over what occupies your mind and also what occupies your heart. Used this way, silence ceases to be just a pause. It becomes a path to self-discovery. Silence isn't simply something you do, but something you choose. It's a quiet force that teaches you how to direct your attention without getting lost in the noise of the world. As Leonardo da Vinci said, "Nothing strengthens authority like silence." Part 6. Silence as a mental discipline. The human mind is noisy by nature. It talks all the time, even when you don't open your mouth. There's a constant dialogue within us, made up of memories, comparisons, fears, and plans. It's like a radio that never turns off, skipping from station to station without stopping. And that's precisely why silence needs to be practiced as a discipline. It doesn't arise by chance, it's trained. Taming one's thoughts is one of the highest forms of inner strength. The Stoics knew this. They saw silence not simply as the absence of speech, but as the mind's mastery over internal noise. Because there's no point in remaining silent on the outside, if inside there's still a multitude of voices vying for space. The discipline of silence begins when you decide to observe your thoughts without getting lost in them. When you learn to separate what's useful from what's distracting. And this training requires the same effort as any physical practice: consistency, patience, and repetition. Epictetus said, "First tell yourself who you want to be, then do what must be done." And one of the first actions of those seeking clarity is to learn to silence their own chaos. Mental silence is a state of focus. It's when the mind stops chasing everything that appears and begins to choose where to place its attention. And this choice is what defines your quality of life. Because what you feed grows, and if you feed the noise, you live in confusion. But if you feed the silence, you live in lucidity. We live in a time that trains us for the opposite. Stimuli every second, flashing screens, sounds calling, thoughts overlapping. We're taught to react quickly, but not to think deeply. Silence is what breaks this cycle. It's the training of the pause between impulse and action. It's the moment when you breathe and ask, "Is this really important right now?" This simple question, asked silently, already transforms the way you live. Seneca said that no one is more unhappy than he who never has time for himself. And that's what the noise of the mind does. It steals the space that should be yours. Silence, on the contrary, gives you back ownership of your own consciousness. It creates a distance between what happens and what you feel. It teaches you to observe fear without being swallowed by it, to look at anxiety from the outside, to notice the thought before it drags you down. This is discipline, a mind that serves reason, not despair. At first, this practice seems impossible. You sit down to breathe, and within seconds, you're already thinking about what needs to be resolved, what someone said about you, what still needs to be done. But each time you realize this and return to silence, you're strengthening your focus muscle. Just as the body is shaped by exercise, the mind is shaped by presence. It's not perfect silence that matters, it's the constant return to it. The discipline of silence also requires humility, because it shows you that you don't control everything, and you don't need to. A mind trained in silence understands that not every question needs to be answered now, not every problem needs to be solved today. This mental patience is what separates the impulsive from the wise. The former reacts, the latter observes. The former wears itself out, the latter understands the timing of things. Practicing silence is essentially an act of self-respect. It's recognizing that not every emotion deserves an immediate response, that not every idea needs to be expressed, and that the most powerful thought is the one born from a calm mind. Silence isn't empty. It's the space where reason is organized. It's where decisions gain clarity, intentions align, and the spirit finds peace. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul becomes as large as the thoughts it harbors, and if your mind is filled with noise, it becomes narrow. But when you practice silence, it expands. You begin to think more deeply, feel more lightly, and act with more purpose. So treat silence as a daily practice, like sharpening a blade. Every minute you choose not to react, not to be distracted, not to get lost in the noise, you're strengthening your mind. Over time, it stops being a hostage to circumstances and becomes the foundation of your tranquility. Silence is the art of the disciplined mind, and discipline is the path to freedom. Because those who master their own thoughts need not master anything else. They have already found what everyone seeks, the peace that does not depend on the world, but is born from within. And if you're enjoying the content, consider becoming a member of the channel. In addition to helping the channel, you also get exclusive content. Click on the link in the description and become a member right now. Back to the content. Part 7. Silence as a social strategy. Not all silence is spiritual. Some are strategic and equally powerful. In a world that talks too much, knowing when to be silent holds a rare form of influence. Silence, when used consciously, is a social tool as effective as eloquence. It changes the pace of conversations, redefines group dynamics, and often says more than any words. Think about the people you consider truly strong. They almost always have a calm, controlled presence, speaking only when necessary. They don't compete for attention. They don't rush to respond. They don't get lost in explanations. Their silence creates a respectful tension, the kind of pause that forces others to think before speaking. It's a subtle, invisible but deeply felt power. Well-placed silence is authority without imposition. The Stoics understood that speech should serve truth, not ego. Speaking less is conserving energy. Every word spent on vanity is a drop of wasted strength. When you master silence, you learn to observe your surroundings before acting, to understand what people are really saying, not just what they say, but what they're trying to hide. Silence is the space where perception grows. It transforms haste into strategy. Seneca said, "It is better to stumble with one's feet than with one's tongue." The impulse to respond quickly is what most reveals weakness. In the heat of emotion, people reveal intentions, insecurities, and even secrets they could keep. Those who respond without thinking give away their territory. Those who choose silence control the conversation. Strategic pauses are disconcerting, unbalancing, and at the same time, protective. They allow you to observe the other person while they try to decipher you. Silence is also a test. It reveals who needs to fill the void and who can inhabit it. The insecure rush to speak, the wise wait. Silence is uncomfortable because it forces the truth to emerge. In negotiations, for example, whoever speaks less usually wins, because the other party feels the need to break the silence, often giving away more than they should. This rule applies to any field, professional, emotional, or social. Silence is the interval where the mask falls, but it's important to distinguish strategic silence from passive silence. The former is intentional. It's presence without reaction. The latter is disguised fear, withdrawal due to insecurity. True silence is active. It observes, calculates, and decides the right moment to act. It's the mastery of verbal energy. It's knowing that each word carries weight and that, used precisely, can move more than an entire speech. In times of constant exposure, silence becomes an act of power. Those who speak less are harder to interpret, label, or manipulate. When you become selective about what you reveal, you gain an aura of mystery, and mystery is one of the oldest forms of authority. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, was a man of few words. He understood that the more one speaks, the more one risks being misunderstood. Silence, on the contrary, maintains control over one's image. There's immense power in not constantly explaining yourself, in simply letting your actions speak for you. Silence, when combined with consistency, generates respect. People may doubt your words, but they rarely doubt your stance. Saying little and acting a lot is the language of silent leaders, those who don't need an audience to exert influence. Used wisely, silence isn't withdrawal, it's command. It shows that you're in control not only of what you say, but also of what you choose not to say. And this control is what differentiates the impulsive from the strategic, the reactive from the disciplined. In a world that seeks attention at any cost, remaining silent is the most eloquent gesture there is. Because in the end, true power lies not in who speaks the loudest, but in who can keep quiet when everyone else is shouting and still be heard. Part 8. Silence in relationships. Silence between people is something many avoid, perhaps because we believe that conversation is the only way to connect. We're so used to thinking that being heard is the same as being noticed that silence sometimes leaves us feeling insecure, as if we're being left out or forgotten. But the truth is, silence doesn't have to mean distance. It can actually open space for a much more sincere and deeper connection. Think for a moment about a conversation where, instead of talking all the time, you decide to let the silence exist. Not that awkward, heavy silence, but a calm silence born of true attention, a moment when the other person can express themselves freely. There's a special power in this kind of stillness. Have you ever noticed how conversations become more real when we stop interrupting? Silence doesn't separate us. It teaches us to truly listen, to hear not only what the other person says, but also what their words awaken within us. Many times when I chose not to respond immediately and preferred to wait a little, I realized how much that pause helped me. It wasn't the silence of someone running away, but of someone breathing before acting. These small moments gave me time to think calmly and prevented me from responding impulsively or making hasty decisions. It was the silence that brought clarity and helped me understand what was really happening. Now imagine the following situation. You have a problem and decide to talk to a friend. As soon as you start talking, they interrupt you and start giving you advice without listening to the end. Then imagine another friend who listens silently, attentively, and only then speaks. In which situation would you feel more understood? Silence is a powerful practice. It's not empty. It's a demonstration of self-control. How many times have we said something we later regret simply because we spoke before thinking? This happens when we don't give ourselves time to reflect. Silence teaches us that we have more control over our emotions than we believe. This control doesn't come from hiding what we feel, but from calmly observing before acting. When we remain silent, we push aside impulses and see the situation more clearly. And it's important to remember, silence isn't the same as coldness. It can actually be one of the purest forms of respect. When you listen patiently to someone, without trying to change the course of the conversation, you're saying with your silence, "I'm here. I hear you." This silent presence creates a safe space where the other person can open up without fear of judgment. A simple way to practice this kind of silence is to count to 7 before responding. It seems small, but this brief interval has great power. It gives you time to truly understand what was said and respond with empathy and clarity. Ultimately, silence in relationships isn't a wall, it's a bridge. When we learn to use it intentionally, we realize it's an invisible bond that unites us more deeply, without needing to fill every second with words. Words have value, yes, but sometimes what matters most is simply being there, present, silent, listening with our hearts. But there is something important to understand. If you have been trying for a long time to get out of your comfort zone and learn more, but you still haven't managed to do so, there may be something you are not aware of. I know what it could be. It is anxiety. Anxiety is like a snake that comes silently and affects you without you realizing it. It makes you feel bad for days, months, and even years. Living like this is like being sick all the time. But I know a solution. The Stoic philosophers, together with modern psychology, have a way to help you get rid of this. I myself managed to cure myself of this anxiety. I made a video explaining how you can get rid of this evil, and it is in the first comment. Click on the link in the first comment and start curing yourself of this feeling of anxiety. Part 9. Silence in your financial life. Have you ever noticed how just talking about money can completely change the mood of a conversation? Suddenly, people start to see you differently, and often not in a better way. Instead of seeing your worth by what you do, they start to measure you by what you have. This often leads to judgments, expectations, and comparisons that are pointless. Imagine the scene. You're having lunch with friends, everything is light and fun until someone comments on how much you earn. No one needs to say anything else, the air changes. Soon jokes arise. "Oh, so you're the one paying today, huh?" And without realizing it, you feel pressured to act in a way you hadn't planned. Now think with me. What if no one knew how much you earned or what you owned? You wouldn't be subject to exaggerated expectations. People would see you for who you are, not for the size of your salary. When others know your numbers, something changes, and you have no control over it. A kind of silent comparison is born. Envy appears, judgment grows, and friendships begin to weigh heavily. Relationships begin to revolve around what you have, not what you represent as a person. Therefore, keeping your income secret is a way to protect your peace. This has nothing to do with being mysterious or arrogant. It's about choosing not to let money define your worth. What you own will never define who you truly are. Think of someone who loves to talk about how much they earn, what they've bought, where they've traveled. Over time, this person becomes everyone's point of comparison, and sooner or later this creates tension. They miss out on moments because they feel watched, weighing every word, afraid of being judged. Now imagine if they had kept all this to themselves. Their life would be lighter, more peaceful. They would be free to simply be themselves, without having to prove anything to anyone. When others know your financial situation, it's common for requests and expectations to arise. He can help, they think, and this puts you in an awkward position between what's fair to you and what they expect you to do. This is where silence about money becomes a defense. When you choose not to disclose your finances, you protect your privacy and ensure that your relationships are based on respect and honesty, not numbers. Of course, with close people like your spouse or a trusted advisor, it's important to talk. But outside that small circle, your money should remain a personal matter, something private and valuable. Protecting your privacy is an act of wisdom. It may seem simple, but it's a powerful gesture. If someone insists on knowing details about how much you earn or spend, you can calmly respond, "I'd rather not talk about that, but it's okay, thanks." And that's it. You maintain control of the conversation and avoid any comparisons. When you activate silent mode in your financial life, you gain freedom. Freedom to take care of what truly matters without carrying the weight of other people's expectations. More than that, you create an environment where respect comes from who you are, not what you have. The next time someone tries to invade your personal space, remember, silence is a smart choice. It's a way to protect your well-being and keep your mind at peace. True value lies not in how much you have, but in how you live, with tranquility, respect, and inner balance. Part 10. Silence in the face of difficult choices. Every great choice is born amid noise, the noise of opinions, expectations, and fears. When we're about to make an important decision, the world seems to want to speak for us. Every person has advice, every external voice tries to point the way, and every internal doubt screams wanting to be heard. It's at this moment that silence becomes more than a pause. It becomes a compass, because it's only in silence that we can distinguish what comes from outside from what truly comes from within. When the mind is agitated, it seeks shortcuts. It wants to resolve issues quickly, relieve tension, and escape uncertainty. But the wise understand that decisions made amidst noise are almost always born of haste, and haste is the enemy of clarity. Silence, on the other hand, is the home of lucidity. It slows down thought and gives space for the essential to emerge. When you become silent, you begin to hear what was muffled by fear. Silence reveals what noise hides, your own voice. Some decisions cannot be driven by momentary emotions. They require stillness, reflection, and courage to endure the emptiness of not yet knowing. Wisdom lies not in deciding quickly, but in deciding rightly, and rightness rarely shouts. It whispers. It is discreet, calm, firm. It can only be heard by those who are still enough to perceive the sound of truth. Marcus Aurelius said that a quiet mind sees things as they are, while a troubled mind sees only shadows. This is why silence is the basis of every true choice. It cleans the lenses through which you see the path. Doubt is often not a sign of weakness, but of depth. Those who remain silent in the face of it are not running away. They are listening. It is in silence that thought matures, like a seed that germinates in the darkness before blossoming in the light. When you allow yourself to be silent, fear begins to lose strength and intuition gains ground. You stop acting out of anxiety and begin acting out of conviction. Silence is the interval between confusion and clarity, the point at which the mind stops racing and the heart begins to understand. How many times when deciding something important have you sought advice, listened to dozens of opinions, and in the end felt even more lost? This happens because the more voices you hear, the further away you become from yourself. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus said that those seeking wisdom must withdraw from the noise and turn inward, because what comes from within is genuine, and what comes from without is merely an echo. The opinions of others can illuminate, but they can never replace your own inner perception. Silence in the face of difficult choices is an act of courage. It's having the humility to admit that it's not yet time to act, and the strength to wait until the answer comes naturally. This waiting isn't passivity, it's maturity. It's understanding that the right timing for things doesn't depend on willpower, but on clarity. And clarity only arises in silence. When confusion overwhelms you, try stepping away. Walk, breathe, be silent. Don't search for the answer, just listen for the space where it might arise. The right decision never comes from haste, it comes from balance. And balance is what arises when the mind becomes still. Silence is the place where heart and reason finally meet, and when they align, you no longer need to ask nor justify. There is a calm that confirms, this is the way. And this calm is the purest sign that the choice is right. So the next time you're faced with a difficult decision, remember, it is not the noise of answers that brings wisdom, it is the silence of well-asked questions. Silence doesn't just help you choose, it teaches you to live more consciously, slowly, and with purpose. Because when you learn to decide in silence, you begin to walk in peace. Part 11. Silence in the age of exposure. Never has so much been said, and never has so little been heard. We live in an age where presence is measured by noise. Those who speak more appear more. Those who show more seem more relevant. But amidst this whirlwind of voices, a forgotten truth emerges. Silence is the new luxury. It is the refuge of those who need nothing to prove, the mark of those who prefer depth to appearances. While the world rushes to be seen, the wise retreat to be whole. Social media has turned silence into suspicion. Those who don't post are judged as indifferent. Those who remain silent are seen as distant. But true silence isn't absence, it's selective presence. It says, I exist, but I don't need to show off. Being discreet in a time of exposure is an act of courage. It's resisting the temptation to turn one's life into a spectacle. It's choosing authenticity over approval. The excess of speech and images creates a constant noise. Every thought needs to be published. Every achievement needs to be validated. Every emotion needs to be shared. The problem is that when everything is said, nothing is truly heard. Profundity disappears, and what remains is a polished, empty surface. Silence in this context is revolution. It is the most powerful way to protect your essence from public consumption. Epictetus said that he who seeks admiration surrenders his freedom. And that's exactly what happens in the age of exposure. We trade peace for attention, clarity for visibility. We begin to measure our worth by the reactions of others and forget to ask whether what we show is truly who we are. Silence is the antidote to this disease of appearance. It restores our integrity, the right to live without being constantly observed, compared, and interpreted. There's an ancient wisdom in guarding what's sacred. Not everything needs to be said. Not every feeling needs to be exposed. Not every idea needs to be shared. Silence preserves mystery, and mystery is what gives depth to the soul. When you become completely transparent to the world, you lose the space where self-knowledge occurs. What's sacred dissolves when it becomes a spectacle. True strength today lies in being selective, in choosing what to show and, most importantly, what to keep silent. Profound people don't need to shout to be noticed. Their presence speaks for them. Those who build in silence are creating something solid, while others are still busy showing off what they haven't even done yet. Seneca warned, "He who lives for the gaze of others dies by their judgment." Silence in the age of exposure is a form of inner freedom. It's the right to not have to justify every step nor explain every choice. It's the rest of the soul that doesn't want to compete just to exist. When you retreat, you're not running away, you're preserving yourself. Because what is constantly on display loses value, but what is kept grows in power. Silence is often misinterpreted as indifference, but it's the opposite. It's awareness. It's knowing that not every moment needs to be translated into words. It's allowing experiences to take on internal meaning before being released into the world. When you experience something intense, silence is the time for digestion. It's there in stillness that learning takes place and meaning emerges. Stoicism reminds us that self-mastery begins with restraint, and in the age of excess, restraint is a rare virtue. Silence is not just a pause, it is a filter. It separates what is true from what is vain, what is essential from what is noise. Those who learn to use it become immune to superficiality. So the next time you feel the urge to expose something just to be seen, stop. Ask yourself, does this come from a desire to share or to be approved? If the answer is the latter, return to silence. That's where authenticity resides. The world is full of speaking voices, but empty of people who truly mean what they say. In the end, silence is what separates those who live to be noticed from those who live to be true. Because those who learn to remain silent do not disappear. They simply no longer need to be seen to exist. Part 12. Silence at work. Silence at work is a much more powerful tool than many people realize. People in various professions already know this. Salespeople, for example, use calculated pauses after speaking to make an impact. Psychologists use silence to give patients time to think and listen to themselves. Doctors and nurses, when caring for someone, remain silent to show respect and empathy. And in negotiations, there's a simple rule. Whoever speaks first loses. Even so, in environments where we want to be noticed, it's common to think that talking constantly is the same as showing strength. But often, we talk too much not because we have something important to say, but because we're afraid of not being heard. The truth is, talking non-stop isn't a sign of wisdom. It can actually show the opposite. Sometimes it just seems like an attempt to appear confident, when in reality it lacks depth. Ultimately, those who talk too much end up pushing people away rather than connecting with them. Plato once said, "The wise man speaks because he has something to say. The fool speaks because he needs to say something." There's a huge difference between wanting to talk and having something valuable to share. When we feel the urgent need to talk, it's emotion that takes over. The desire to vent and unburden ourselves often overrides reason, and that's where we go wrong. We react impulsively and fail to act intelligently. In Stoic philosophy, the focus isn't on hiding or denying what we feel, but on understanding where the feeling comes from and learning to control it before it controls us. When you act without thinking, letting your emotions decide for you, you become like a puppet. Any person or situation can throw you off balance. It's like that friend who explodes at the slightest opportunity, where a spark quickly turns into a fire. But when you learn the value of silence, everything changes. Silence is not a sign of weakness, but of inner strength. It shows that you have control over yourself. It's understanding that no matter what others do or say, you can still choose how to react. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of a calm mind, one that knows when it's worth speaking and when it's best to remain silent. True power lies in not being carried away by the emotion of the moment. Silence is your shield, your way of not being manipulated by the environment or the opinions of others. When you consciously choose silence, you demonstrate maturity. You stop being a prisoner of words and become your own master. As Socrates said, the man who masters himself is the master of his world. When you control your reactions and use silence wisely, you free yourself from impulsiveness and achieve true freedom, the power to direct your own life. Part 13. Silence as a source of creativity. Silence is often mistaken for empty space, but in reality, it's like rich soil, ripe for new ideas. When our heads are full, thoughts become jumbled and nothing seems to make sense. This mental turmoil prevents good solutions from emerging. But when we take a break and let silence enter, everything begins to organize itself. It's common to feel the urge to solve everything quickly, to act non-stop, but this rush can get in the way. Silence is a pause that not only calms the body, but also relieves the pressure of constant action. It creates a moment where the mind can simply exist, and it's in this moment that answers appear naturally, effortlessly. Imagine for a moment creating this silence. It could be during a calm walk, taking deep breaths, or simply being still and paying attention to what's happening inside you. In this serene space, ideas emerge on their own, slowly, without pressure, as if springing from nowhere. This is the power of silence. It loosens the shackles of our imagination. When we stop chasing answers and stop acting on impulse, we open a new field for the unexpected to flourish. Silence reconnects us with the purest part of our minds, shutting out the noise of the world and also the noise of our own worries. Furthermore, silence does something incredible. It helps the brain reorganize itself. Parts of the mind that were disconnected begin to talk to each other, and from this, new ideas and different solutions are born. When we stop forcing ourselves to create, the mind finds its own path, clearer and more creative. Albert Einstein once said, "I think 99 times and discover nothing. When I stop thinking and become silent, the truth comes to me." And that's exactly how it happens. The best ideas often emerge in the simplest moments, during a shower, a walk, or when we're just breathing. When silence takes over, answers appear not because we search hard for them, but because we leave space for them to come. Therefore, silence is the door that unlocks our creative power. It's not just the absence of sound, but the fertile ground where ideas grow lightly. When we stop forcing ourselves and simply pause for a moment, something new is born. True creativity comes not from haste or pressure, but from the calmness of allowing something new to emerge on its own. Part 14. Silence and spiritual self-knowledge. There's a kind of silence that isn't just a pause between thoughts. It's a portal. A sacred space where you encounter something greater than yourself. This silence isn't emptiness but full presence. It doesn't separate you from the world, it reconnects you with it. It's in this silence that the spirit awakens and self-knowledge ceases to be theory and becomes a living experience. We live surrounded by spiritual words, ideas, and concepts. Everyone talks about connection, purpose, energy, faith. But the truth is that the more we talk about the spirit, the further away we become from it. Because the spirit doesn't speak, it feels. And to feel it, silence is necessary. Spiritual silence is the fertile ground where the soul can breathe without interference from the ego. It is there that we begin to distinguish the voice of fear from the voice of truth, the difference between desire and direction. The Stoics called this state ataraxia, a profound serenity that arises when you stop fighting the flow of life and begin to listen to it. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul is at peace when it stops searching outside and turns inward. Silence, in this sense, is a wordless prayer, a surrender. It's the practice of stripping yourself of demands, comparisons, and distractions to simply be. When the external noise ceases, you begin to perceive the inner movement, the fear that still dominates, the sadness that cries out for healing, the wisdom that was already there, waiting to be heard. Spiritual self-knowledge doesn't come from accumulating answers, but from learning to listen, listening to yourself without rushing, without judgment, without needing to understand everything immediately. In silence, the mind becomes transparent, and what once seemed confusing makes sense. What you call intuition is often just the voice of your spirit finally finding space to speak, but it speaks softly, and that's why only those who are silent listen. There's a purity to this encounter. It's the moment you realize you're not the role you play, the body you inhabit, or the emotions you feel. It's something bigger, deeper, and more silent. This realization changes everything. Worries lose their weight, offenses lose their significance, and even time seems to slow down. You begin to move not out of fear but with purpose. You act not to prove but to express, and you discover that true spirituality lies not in seeking something out there, but in remembering what you've always been inside. Epictetus said that man is disturbed not by things but by the vision he has of them, and spiritual silence is what clears this vision. It removes the veil from the mind, dissolves illusions, and allows you to see life as it is, imperfect, transitory, but profoundly beautiful. When you become silent and simply observe, you begin to perceive the harmony that exists even in chaos. The universe is not an enemy, it is a mirror. It accurately reflects the state of your soul. This kind of silence is different from what we use for rest. It is active, conscious. It is a daily practice of presence, a state of constant observation. It can begin with a simple minute of breathing, a watchful gaze at the sunset, a pause between tasks. Little by little, you discover that the sacred is not only found in temples or ancient words, but in everything that exists, including you. Seneca said, "God is near you, He is within you." And silence is the path to this presence. When you learn to inhabit it, you stop searching for meaning and begin to live it. The noise of the mind diminishes, and in its place arises a sense of completeness that depends on nothing external. You understand that you don't need to chase peace. It has always been there, quiet, waiting for you to stop and listen. Therefore, spiritual self-knowledge is not an escape from reality, but a return to it with new eyes. Silence teaches you to see with your heart, to perceive the order behind apparent chaos, and to accept that the world is merely a reflection of what you cultivate within. The deeper your silence, the clearer your soul becomes. In the end, you realize that silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the language of the divine. And when you learn to understand it, you discover something extraordinary. The peace you were seeking was already speaking to you all along. It was just waiting for you to learn to listen. Part 15. Silence as protection of energy. There's a kind of fatigue that doesn't come from the body, but from a mind that talks too much. It's the exhaustion of those who constantly explain, of those who defend themselves, of those who try to be understood by those who will never understand. Excessive talk drains vital energy. Silence, on the contrary, conserves it. It's like an invisible shield that protects what's essential: focus, calm, and clarity. The Stoics knew that mental energy is a human being's most precious resource. Seneca said that we waste our lives with useless worries, as if we had infinite time. The same goes for words. We expend verbal energy on situations that don't deserve a response, and every impulsive word is a thread of energy ripped from us. Silence is, therefore, an act of spiritual economy, the art of choosing where to invest one's presence. When you speak less, you observe more, and those who observe more understand what truly matters. Silence creates a natural barrier against external chaos. It prevents other people's emotions from invading your inner space. How many times have you left a conversation exhausted without understanding why? It's because the dialogue wasn't an exchange, it was a drain. There was too much talk, too much feeling, too much absorption. Silence is the filter that separates the essential from the unnecessary. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul is colored by the thoughts it harbors." And speech is an extension of this. Every word spoken carries a charge of energy. When you talk excessively, you spread parts of yourself out into the world. Silence, on the other hand, focuses you. It recenters you. It makes you gather your scattered energy and bring it back to its axis. This is why introspective people often seem more present. They don't talk much, but when they do, their energy is complete. Silence as protection isn't withdrawal, it's intelligence. It's knowing that not every opinion deserves a response, not every conflict needs to be fueled, not every provocation should be heeded. Silence is the shield of those who have learned that preserving the peace is more valuable than proving a point. It keeps your energy focused on what you can control, and that is the heart of Stoic wisdom. Epictetus said that the mind is free when it focuses on what depends on it. Talking less is exactly that, choosing not to waste energy on conversations that change nothing, on arguments that only inflame the ego. It's resisting the temptation to participate in every noise, to respond to every stimulus. Silence keeps you clean, whole, undisturbed. There's also a kind of invisible pollution in the modern world, the excess of information, notifications, and opinions. Each interaction steals a bit of focus. Practicing silence is the most effective way to recover this dispersed energy. It's the moment when you tune out the world and return to listening to your own rhythm. It's in this quiet space that the mind recharges and the spirit strengthens. Over time, you realize that silence creates a denser, almost magnetic presence. People begin to listen to you more attentively, not because you speak loudly, but because you speak little and with intention. Silence gives your words weight and your presence meaning. It transforms your energy into something selective and powerful. Seneca wrote, "Nothing is more worthy of a wise mind than to maintain calm in the face of agitation." This calm is protected energy, and silence is the wall that preserves it. When you learn to use it, you stop reacting to everything and begin responding only to what is worthy of your strength. Few realize how much this changes everything: productivity, mood, relationships, even health. To maintain silence is to guard your own inner fire. It's to prevent the world from stealing what gives you direction. Noise distracts, silence concentrates, and concentration is power, the kind of power that doesn't shout but transforms. In the end, silence is more than a pause. It's an energetic boundary. Those who learn to respect it become lighter, more lucid, and more resilient to the storms of others. Because protecting one's own energy is protecting one's own soul, and nothing is more valuable than that. Part 16. Silence is worth the effort. We know that on any truly worthwhile path, effort always walks alongside us. And silence, like a new pair of shoes, can seem strange and even uncomfortable at first. It requires patience and a willingness to continue, even when the mind wants to run away and the body seeks distractions. But, like a seed hidden in the earth, silence grows quietly, silently. It doesn't seek applause, nor does it need immediate attention. Its growth is slow, invisible at first, but powerful. If we remain steadfast, caring for it consistently, it begins to blossom within us, changing everything, little by little, from the inside out. Sometimes we feel like comparing our path to others. We look around and forget that each person lives their own story, with different challenges and unique times. Therefore, my practice shouldn't be a competition, but a daily effort to be a little better than I was yesterday. The only adversary I need to overcome is my past self. Think of a monk sitting in deep silence inside his cave. For him, silence is like breathing, something natural, part of who he is. For a doctor working in an emergency room, silence can be rare, a brief interval that requires effort and attention amidst the chaos. The two live very different realities, but they share the same principle. The value of silence lies not in the circumstances, but in the intention to cultivate it. Silence is not a void, it is a living presence, full of possibilities. Within it reside undiscovered ideas, moments of clarity, and flashes of wisdom. As Socrates said, silence is a virtue that brings understanding. This pause, this space without noise, is the terrain where the deepest truths emerge. When we allow ourselves to immerse ourselves in this silence, it ceases to be just an exercise and becomes a true inner change. And yes, over time, the effort to cultivate it becomes part of who we are. It transforms into a calm, almost invisible force, but one that shapes our mind and spirit in lasting ways. And if you've made it this far, remember, the path of silence is also the path of strength. Leave a comment saying "on the path" and thank you for being present in this reflection.